remedy. There have been some interesting court decisions recently that haven't pleased us too much in cases having nothing to do with spyware, but cases that the FTC brought, where the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, which is a pretty powerful federal appellate court covering New York State and other areas up that way, said that to get disgorgement, we have to prove that the money that we seek to disgorge flowed directly from the wrong to the defendant who we are suing. As you know, in a lot of spyware cases, there's a whole distribution network, and the money gets split up among all sorts of different players. And the effect of this decision on disgorgement has been quite troublesome to us, because if you take the court's decision and apply it to a spyware case where you've got a broad affiliate network, what we would have to do is name every single affiliate and trace every dime that is generated to the particular defendant or affiliate from whom we are attempting to obtain disgorgement. So this is a troublesome situation. We don't necessarily think that the court got it right, and that's only in one circuit. But it's very tough to, under the law, to get the kind of financial remedies included in the remedy package. No trouble getting injunctions, because we can show the bad practices that then can provide a basis for the court to say, don't do this anymore. But we all know that saying to people who are doing this kind of stuff, don't do this anymore, in a civil action is not necessarily the greatest deterrent.
What about
action.
Criminal trespass?
What about it?
I mean,
it's not in the area of it's not in the FTC's jurisdiction.
It's not in the FTC's jurisdiction. It's not in most state AG's jurisdictions. It's in the jurisdiction of local prosecutors and the Department of Justice, criminal enforcement authorities. Now, I live, like Ari, in Washington, D.C., where there's a local crime emergency that's been declared, but don't believe it, because D.C. is really a nice and safe city. But the police and the prosecutors are all out, rounding up folks who are, robbing folks, pickpocketing and doing that kind of stuff. And every time they're doing that, I can tell you they're not doing the District of Columbia Police Department, I don't think has a spyware unit. This is a problem. It's a problem, because you're absolutely right that millions of dollars are being lost when machines are rendered inoperable and networks are crippled. And it's one of a host of issues that are facing basically the same organizations. So what are we going to do? How do you set the priorities? How do you marshal the resources?
Eileen, just to follow up on that, I mean, what can the folks here, the researchers and people that work on security, when they come across something, what can they do? Call
and email. Let us know. We really need you to be the eyes and the ears.
Do you want to follow up on that point?
Yes. We see a lot of compromised systems that are distributing spyware, obviously numbers of botnets. And how can you get somebody, first of all, interested in shutting them down? You report them to an ISP, and they're still up and running 2 months later. And when you report them to an ISP, how can you get the ISP to do something more than just get the consumer to re-image and get them to find out who is controlling this computer?
I bet there's somebody here from an ISP who'd like to try an answer at that.
That was also a real big challenge in the Trojan that I was mentioning here in this example. It took us weeks to figure out, first of all, who is responsible for this machine, because the ISP was not responsible for it. The end user was running the machine within the ISP's host there. So that was a big part of the challenge there, to track that down before we got some action going there.
Yes? Can I ask for clarification on the difference between spyware from Microsoft or Sony versus spyware from spammers and pushers?
Does someone want to take that, Dan?
Well, if you asking me about spyware from Sony, awesome. There is no difference. I mean, there is a certain set of behavior. It doesn't matter who's doing it. And that was one of the real problems we had during the Sony fiasco. It wasn't just that Sony did what they did, it's that a fair number of vendors who can go nameless said, oh, this is Sony. Well, Sony can't do anything bad. Well, that, and they could sue us into a small spot on the ground. So there is no difference between it. If you are behaving in a manner that is violating the privacy or violating the stability of a user's machine, you're liable for it. At least, let me put it this way. At least that is the says, you know, I'm an engineer. My goal here is find problems, and if they're illegal, get them forwarded to people for societal enforcement. So this problem lives at the legal technical boundary. We can technically find what we're able to. We can technically remediate what we're able to. But eventually, you know, we can't go around arresting people. Although, damn, that'd be fun.
But you know, you are to say that this problem, in its worst iteration, certainly lives at the legal technical boundary is absolutely dead on. It does. It does. And you know, the people who do it know that. And you know, the questions for the Congress are whether they want to change the legal boundary, and the questions for researchers and technologists are how fast can you move the technology boundary.
The only thing that appears that it could work is the blacklist approach is as inflexible and unworkable for, you know, we abandoned blacklists on our firewalls a long while ago. At least most people seem to have. You know, oh, we'll block this, oh, we'll block that, oh, we'll block that. There really needs to be a prescribed whitelist of legal behaviors for what is going on here. And anything that deviates from that list needs to be presumed basically criminal unless proved innocent. I mean, that's a fairly significant change, but that's the market we're looking at right now. We're looking at a market right now that is, you know, granted, it's getting better. And in fact, I've been, you know, reasonably satisfied with the types of efforts I've been seeing. But you're right, it's a jurisdictional issue. You are so constrained in what you can do for this problem.
And the other concern is that, you know, is to pay attention to advertising models as they develop in the adware space. It's important to not draw a line that chills protected speech, that deters what could be very legitimate advertising, and that's really hard. I think in this area, we have found, and the FTC's been involved in policing advertising for a long time, and I think that we have found, you know, watching the development of internet advertising models, and there really aren't models that have taken firm root yet. You know, every so many months we see a new model developing, and it's tried, and there are sometimes problems, and sometimes we have to sue, and you know, other times things just don't take off. But how is, you know, advertising really going to move in this channel? Because people really want the content, and something has to support it. Yep. And so these are big challenges.
I want to give Gerhard a chance because I know that you know, Webroot has to make these decisions about what gets on, what you add to your list and what you don't. I was also wondering if you could talk about behavioral, some of the new behavioral things that people are looking at doing with that anti-spyware.
We are facing this decision pretty much every day when we get some new piece of spyware that we have to make a decision now. Are we going to detect this one? Are we going to block this one? Are we quarantine this one? And we have a pretty well-defined procedure that we have documented that is very transparent, very clear in terms of if it falls in this category, it establishes this behavior, if there's an uninstall routine, if there is contact points of contact on there, how you can contact the vendor. So it's a pretty methodical way we have developed here because we need to stay clear as well. We need to be fair at the same time to everybody, treat the good guys and the bad guys pretty much at the same level. So we're pretty much working from a working book here that we have developed that we use as a guideline for our researchers when we make a decision, are we going to add detection for this one or quarantining particular pieces of spyware.
And that's what the ASC risk model is supposed to do. It's supposed to help the companies in this space help make those decisions about what gets on your scorecard or your list that you base that on. And that's available on that table too for people that want to follow up on that. Yes?
I had a question. How would Mr.
I believe it's at the, again, this is a problem at the legal technical boundaries. What I want is for when these spyware vendors go to their lawyers, say, is it safe to do this? I don't want them to say, well, there's nothing that specifically bans it. And this is a different model, but it needs to be this way. You are banned from putting ads on a user's machine unless you are compliant with X, Y, and Z. So there is a particular whitelist, there's a particular path that you can follow to do things that allow you to put these ads up with constraints. It has to be easy to detect where they came from. It needs to be easy to uninstall the software that's causing it. It needs to happen within a certain amount of time. You change it from, well, you can't do that and you can't do that, to, listen, your entire industry has caused hundreds of millions of dollars worth of damage. With planes, if planes were falling out of the sky, we'd have pretty good regulation. You know what? Planes could fall out of the sky. We do have pretty good regulation. You don't get to fly unless you pass those rules. What I'm saying is you don't get to put ads on machines unless you pass certain rules, because that's the level of damage we're seeing. You know, when it's the #1 problem that IT administrators are coming out with, you know, the scale of damage here, what was the numbers at one point? 80% of machines had it? Yeah. I mean, we can't mess around with this stuff. We need a new model for dealing with spyware.
I also share the notion. I think there is even further. If you look purely from a technical perspective, I think that the model that we are subscribing today in the whole malware industry, be it antivirus, be it anti-spyware, be it other industries that are targeted to the malware space, the blacklisting model is not going to scale. We are clearly reaching the limit of those technologies now, and I think it's the same case here. We need to start rethinking the whitelisting model as well from this perspective. And the whitelisting model is not something radical new. It has been used for many years, but the challenge is how do you manage your whitelist in a scalable way in an organization, an enterprise there. But I think I subscribe to that thinking pattern as well, that we need to move towards a model where we think about what is good and what is allowed versus what is the bad stuff that we want to keep off the machines.
Yes?
But you also need a new policy of looking at how the people are dealt with. When that 21-year-old is at jail in a couple of years, they're going to be offering him jobs in security. These are job interviews for a lot of these people.
Andre, can you take that one actually, since
Joy, thank you. So I saw a friend CSO from Liberty Mutual who started the Razor Group for buying view, and one of the things that, from my perspective, that you always have to evaluate is evaluate not only the talent but the ethical aspects of that as well. I mean, having an entity that potentially can compromise, you know, my organization and leak its intellectual capital and other things like that isn't necessarily a risk that I'm going to take as it relates to hiring an entity just because they have, you know, the skill set there. So I think, you know, although we have seen other organizations, you know, do very, you know, contrary things, but I think, you know, there's a moral question that you have to ask, and you know, and that question is, do you basically employ an entity that is very talented, knowing the fact that basically you're letting danger into the home, and that in doing so that the organization may be compromised. That's just something that a risk that we're just not going to take. Because a lot of times, you know, out there in the field, I mean, if you think about from an information security program, right, you have 3 L.